Lawyers of Reddit, what is the most outrageous case someone has asked you to take? Story 1. I worked on a custody dispute between a mother and grandmother where both sides were absolutely outraged by the other's claims. The mother was very upset that she was alleged to have been a stripper. I was a prostitute, but I was never a stripper. The grandmother, in return, was furious that she was alleged to have 21 cats in her two-bedroom apartment. We only have 17 cats. How dare she flat out lie and say that we have 21 cats? The child ended up living with the father in a different state. Story 2. A year out of law school, I once had a potential client who wanted me to sue Canada. Apparently, he could not get into the country due to his felony record. I tried to reason with him that it was up to the sovereign nation to set its own rules regarding entry to the country, but he insisted that we could make a lot of money suing Canada. I didn't take the case, but I told him I might be able to get him a letter that said sorry. From Canada Edit, it's to its. I dictated this on my phone as I was getting coffee. Thank God for the grammar people on Reddit for saving me from this catastrophic mistake in life. Story 3. I work in patent law, and most of my cases are pretty mundane. Small variations on items that you use every day, with enough innovation to warrant trying to profit off of it. Sometimes you get one that's actually innovative, which are the fun cases, but occasionally you get the client that's just a complete wacko. This guy, let's call him Vlad, strides into my office and lets me know he has a spectacular invention that he wants to show me, but that I must keep it secret. Vlad is a heavy-set Russian, the kind you'd expect to see in a gangster movie, with a thick accent to match. I explained that I would be happy to sign an NDA and that confidentiality will be assured. Once he was appeased that his mysterious invention wouldn't be on the front page of the Times tomorrow, he asked me to come out to his office so he could show me. Now, I was a little nervous, given his physique and the secrecy with which he was handling all of this, so I asked one of our clerks to accompany me. I drove the three of us to his office in complete silence. Any small talk I tried to make was stonewalled. Finally, we got to his office building, which thankfully looked to be a legit workspace, and not a back-alley warehouse, as I'd originally feared. He took us to a side office once we got to his floor, and pulled me aside. "This will be my greatest achievement," he whispered, before opening the door with a flourish. In the room, there was nothing but a single bright red word painted on the wall. "What is this?" I asked him. He stood over me and gazed directly into my eyes, breathing, "I call it the serious tag. OP forgot to put one." Story 4. As a public defender, I defended a grown man accused of stealing magic cards from Walmart. There was an hour-long security video meticulously showing from dozens of angles that he was picking up sets of cards, unwrapping them, and discarding the wrappers around the store. He insisted that he was innocent, and we actually went to a jury trial instead of securing a plea deal. It took the jury 8 minutes to convict him, and the judge laid into my client telling him that he was the worst thief he had ever seen. I forgot the best part. At one point in the trial, I had to spend 45 minutes explaining to the judge what magic cards are. He couldn't understand why anyone need more than one deck. Story 5. I'm not a lawyer, but as a child I was taken into foster care and then returned to my father's custody, so he had custody of me from ages 4, 16. When I was 22, he tried to sue me for the costs involved in caring for me for that time, saying that he had no obligation to take custody of me and had only done so to save me from foster care. It was obviously dismissed and I don't talk to him anymore. Story 6. Family law attorney here. I just had a custody case go back to court over eyeglasses. My client didn't like the glasses her ex bought the kid. So stupid. I want to go back to criminal defense. Gang homicide cases had nicer people to deal with than family law. Story 7. I had a potential client come in and say that he wanted to sue his uncle for murder. Setting aside the fact that you can't sue someone for murder, I asked him who did his uncle murder. He replied, "Me." I turned the case down. Story 8. While working at a plaintiff's employment firm, 2 memorable consults came in one. Guy gets fired for being late too much, wants to sue for discrimination because he has a sugar addiction and needs to stop at 7-11 for a big gulp before his shift begins. As a result, he usually ends up missing the bus. 2. A woman comes in. She was a bus driver and was terminated during her probationary period. She had 3 accidents in 6 weeks. She wants to sue for discrimination because she has anxiety and a therapy rabbit. All the while sitting at the conference room table petting the therapy bunny. Edit, grammar, typos. Story 9. A woman called saying that she had a product liability suit involving animal crackers she gave to her daughter. I was thinking it was going to be something to do with food poisoning and keep listening. She explained that when she looked at the crackers, it looked like the monkey was holding its penis. It was a banana. This woman was mortified and ashamed. She said she told all her coworkers and they were very shocked and uncomfortable. I wanted to tell her she was nuts and that they were probably freaked out because you were talking about animal cracker dicks. Story 10. Not a lawyer, but my uncle once had a client trying to sue Sears for distributing pornography to minors because he caught his 12-year-old son masturbating to the lingerie section. Story 11. There's a lot of them. I've been asked to evict a ghost. I actually did that one. I regularly get phone calls promising to make me a millionaire if I'll sue the police. There's the completely guilty offender sitting in jail who wanted me to handle his appeal under circumstances that would have resulted in him being released, then immediately charged and convicted of a more serious crime. So many. So many. Story 12. The day after President Obama won the election in 2008, I had a potential client cold call for a claim of copyright infringement. He wanted to sue then President-elect Obama for having 7 U.S. flags on the podium during his acceptance speech. I asked him for a registration number so I could verify details, and he hung up on me. Edit. Second most outrageous case was a potential client wanted to protect, copyright, maybe patent, a Wii game that used the Wii controller and Wii Fit. I wanted to take it but was voted down by the firm. When I told the inventor this, he said in a resigned voice, "Third time that's happened." I really felt bad for that inventor but put him on to another of my friends who was a solo IP lawyer. Edit 2. Some people are confused about the 7 flags thing, and upon review, I can understand. The potential client claimed he had copyrighted the use of 7 flags on a stage for presentations. This is ridiculous and would never have been allowed a registration. But he didn't know that. Likely the potential client was high, drunk, or a scammer. My guess is he wanted to file a lawsuit, then sit down in a boardroom during pre-trial motions and try to settle for a nominal sum. He would get a few thousand, minus lawyer fees, and go away. Unfortunately, the potential client didn't understand one. You need a copyright registration before you file a lawsuit. 2. You would never get a registration for having 7 flags in a backdrop of a stage. 3. That he was going to get nothing from then President-elect Obama because he would have had a firecracker team of lawyers at his avail. And 4. Homie, don't play that. It would have been unethical for me to file that lawsuit as I didn't think it had a chance of succeeding. In other words, I thought it was frivolous and didn't want to test local Rule 11 jurisprudence, that is, receive sanctions, or lose my license. When I asked for his reg number, that was a clue. I knew what I was doing, and he bailed. Story 13. Lawyer in a small town here. I mostly do estate planning, probate, old people stuff, etc. I have a client that sued his ex-wife for not selling the house after the divorce as she was supposed to. Judge held her in contempt and asked what he wanted my client to do, and he had her thrown in jail. They're both nearly 80 years old. The client also has something valuable buried on his property for his grandchildren after he dies. I have a sealed letter in my desk that he pays me a goodly sum each month to hold and give to his grandson when the old man dies. Story 14. A woman had cut off her husband's hand maliciously and was facing time and a divorce. She wanted me to help her sue the knife manufacturer for damages. Walking to work at the moment, I could probably let you know a few more if you are interested. Source work in law firm in Cleveland, Ohio. Story 15. Criminal prosecutor here. A patrol officer pulled over a driver for some traffic violation, I think failure to signal. After a heated roadside exchange where the driver initially refused to turn over her license, she ultimately relented and thrust the license with undue force into the officer's outstretched hand. The cop charged her with aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer. When asked to justify his actions, he stated that people need to learn to respect the police. We dismissed the charge, apologized to the defendant, and told the cop to never bring us something like that again. I can't recall if Internal Affairs was notified. I work with the police every day, and the majority of them are good people. This guy was a... Story 16. I didn't have this case, but Ernie Chambers actually tried to bring a lawsuit against God. It was dismissed because God couldn't be notified because he did not have an address. Story 17. During law school, I was a member of a legal clinic. We represented low-income individuals under the supervision of a licensed attorney professor. We handled family law issues, but would try to point clients in the right direction if we could not personally help them. One man came in and stated that he wanted to sue Best Buy, which is not uncommon, but why he wanted to sue Best Buy was different. See, this man said he purchased a refurbished computer from Best Buy for his daughter as an Xmas present. Best Buy had neglected to remove the previous owner's password screen, and thus, this man and his daughter were unable to access the computer until they took it back to Best Buy, which was understandably closed on Xmas Day. This, he said, caused his 12-year-old daughter to begin to question the very existence of Santa Claus. He and his daughter then argued the rest of the day, until finally he admitted to her that there was, spoiler alert, no Santa Claus. His words were, "Seeing your daughter lose faith in Santa ruined all Xmas's to come." He also claimed that now his daughter was a real since she had stopped believing in Santa Claus. What was more interesting is the amount of damages he requested. He stated he believed that Best Buy owed him at least 25 million inches because Xmas was ruined. His daughter will never believe in Santa again, and now he has to deal with her being a real now. I did not believe he had any type of recourse against Best Buy for inadvertently demolishing his daughter's belief in Santa. But even if I did, our clinic could not help him. I informed him that we only handled family law issues, and he should call the local bar association's lawyer referral service. He stated the bar association already told him they would not take his case. Then he proceeded to ask if I had children. I told him I did not. Then he proceeded to wish that all my future kids have their belief in Santa Claus ruined. He stated he would not help me if that happened. He then told me to off and left. The whole time I was wondering how this guy's daughter believed in Santa Claus till age 12. Edit. Formatting thanks guys/gals. Story 18. When I was a trainee solicitor, my principal had a guy come in who spoke almost exclusively in quotes from US presidents. This was a specialist law firm in a very English town, and the dude was about as English as it's possible to be. Tweed suit with leather elbow patches, English. He wasn't initially anything to do with me, but half an hour into the initial meeting, my principal wandered into my office totally exasperated, which I'd never seen before, and she said, paraphrasing here, "Crow_eggs, you're a patient man. Find out what this batshit loon actually wants. It'll be a good first case evaluation for you to handle by yourself." I spent 2 hours listening to him talk. Literally every second sentence began with, "as Woodrow Wilson once said," or, as Grover Cleveland once said. He even managed to quote Taft. I mean, even the craziest of crazy doesn't quote Taft. It's Taft for Christ's sake. Anyway, after 2 hours, I explained how much the meeting was costing him, even though I was just a trainee, and he visibly sagged and said, all blurted out like a naughty child, "I poured bleach on the roots of my neighbor's tree, and it fell into my greenhouse. Can you make him pay for the repairs?" I gently explained why that wouldn't work, and he cried. So I called the loveliest secretary in the firm, who made him a cup of tea, and sat with him until he went home. Story 19. Not lawyer, but paralegal. I took a cold call one evening from a gentleman who was clearly high, probably meth, and homeless. He wanted to sue his local police dispatch, 911, paramedics, and a hospital. We are a civil litigation firm, because he narked on someone who was now, allegedly, trying to get him. It was now the police station's fault that he would have to stab the guy, and he repeatedly asked me if he should carry a knife so he could do said stabbing. He apparently had also asked the 911 dispatch this same question, and all they would tell him is that no, he should not in fact go stab someone. Also asked if he should go stab the other guy before he had a chance to get him. He then wanted to come hide at our office while keeping his knife and deciding where to go stab the other guy. Definitely most surreal phone call of my life thus far. And before it's asked, no, we didn't report the situation to anyone. We are in a large city, and he said his location was up north. Did not give us his name, and we don't have caller ID. Very old boss. Hates technology because he can't use understand it. So we really didn't have anything to give the police as far as useful information. Fun times. Story 20. I got a call from a client I had represented in the past, wanting me to help out her son. He and his girlfriend wanted to get married, but she was under 18, so she needed permission from her parents, and they wouldn't give permission. We chatted about it for a while, and then she told me it was an urgent matter, because the girl was pregnant. I said, "Wait, how old did you say she was?" Mom said, 14 inches, I said. "And how old is your son?" Mom said, 20 inches, I said. "You need to immediately hire a criminal defense lawyer to help you with this." And then I had to explain to her why her son had a bigger problem than not being able to get married. Edit. This was in the southern US. In this situation, there was an extremely high chance that the son could be charged with statutory rape and child molestation. I didn't look up the laws, so I don't know if her being pregnant would have allowed them to get married without consent. Even if they did get married, he could still be charged. They never called me back, so I don't know for sure what happened. But I knew the family, and I don't think I ever saw the son's name pop up on any court dockets. So I guess it all worked out in the end, and nobody made a fuss about him knocking up a 14-year-old. Story 21. Not a lawyer yet. I'm in my last semester of law school and about to take my last ever law school final today. As a law student, you have the option of doing a lot of low-level pro bono work. I was at a family court as part of a project to help abused women get restraining orders against their abusers. To look lawyerly, all of us law students dressed up in suits. Family court tends to be filled with pro se fillers, people representing themselves. So, anyone dressed in a suit starts attracting all of the people who don't want to deal with the issues themselves since, hey, they look like a lawyer. This one gentleman came up to me and my partner, another law student, asking us if we could help him file a restraining order against his girlfriend because she wrote on her Facebook wall that he had a small penis, which he assured us wasn't true. He also wanted to get a restraining order against a different ex-girlfriend because she took some of his clothes and things when they broke up and he wanted them back. He also wanted to get a restraining order against his brother for beating him up when he was a kid. He was in his 30s. Edit. Thanks everyone for the encouragement. The admin final went well. One more tomorrow. And to anyone else in finals, you've got it. To the people saying he could get an order for libel, probably not. Libel requires showing of harm, and that would be a pretty tricky thing to prove, especially in the state we are in. Furthermore, getting a temporary restraining order through a family court is a little goofy. Also, the conversion claim. Yes, that's technically true, but what the guy described was maybe $50 max of clothing. A restraining order would not solve that problem. And sadly, it'd be hard to capture the rambling, bizarre speech patterns of this gentleman. Edit 2. For the record, the program was called CAP, Courtroom Advocates Project. Story 22. I remember a guy called me and wanted to take action against the post office. He had received a letter from them saying that they would no longer deliver packages to him as he was never appropriately dressed when he opened the door to accept them. I remember being nervous about asking him to elaborate. Story 23 years ago. I had someone ask me informally whether he should sue the Jerry Springer Show because they turned his family down as guests. Yeah, out of there real quick. Story 24. My parents are both attorneys. Most recently, their batshit crazy neighbor asked my dad to serve as his attorney in a slip-and-fall suit against my parents. He had come over unannounced and uninvited at 6 a.m. on a snowy morning and fell down our driveway. My dad was the one who helped him up and called the ambulance on his behalf. The next day, crazy neighbor dropped off legal documents in my parents' mailbox for my dad to look over to see if he had a case against my dad. And this is why I hate people. Story 25. Someone just asked me to modify their child support because they lost their job. The kid is 17 years, 11 months old. Get the out of my office. Edit. For some clarity. In my state, child support always ends at 18 or 19 if the child is pursuing a high school diploma or GED at an accredited institution. This child has already graduated HS. Story 26. Criminal defense social worker at a legal aid organization. I had a client who ran 3 red lights on a very busy street, knocked over a police officer, drove up on the sidewalk, forcing people to jump out of the way, and was finally dragged out of his car in a parking lot. He wanted us to refer him to a civil attorney to sue the city because an officer was too rough with him during his arrest. I mean, I get it. They were probably rough with him. Police brutality in my city is real, but good luck with that lawsuit. Story 27. Not a lawyer, but worked in a law firm. Had a potential client who needed to access something on a high shelf when she was at work. Instead of using the step that was provided, she took it upon herself to take her shoes off, then stand on her chair to reach the shelf. She forgot about her own shoes on the way down and tripped over them. She tried to blame her employers. That's not how it works, love. There was another woman using a vacuum cleaner in her own home, and she tripped over the lead. When we asked who it was in particular, she intended to sue, as there was nothing wrong with the vacuum cleaner and no actual injury. She became confused and confessed she did not know. She just thought she could claim from someone. Pretty tame examples, but amusing at the time. Some people just need saving from themselves. Edit. This was in the UK, for all those wondering. Story 28. I recently settled a broken penis case. That was kind of crazy. Our firm represents a lot of veterans. We get several calls a year from vets who allege a microchip or transmitter was put inside their head. They claim to hear radio waves, that it interrupts their thoughts, that they were experimented on, etc. Those are always weird calls. In college one summer, I worked for a firm that was processing thousands of hurricane damage and injury claims. Sometimes claimants would call the firm to ask questions or start a claim, and we would take turns answering those calls. One day, this guy called claiming that when the water level rose after the hurricane, sharks escaped from the city aquarium, and he was attacked by one of them. He sounded insane, kept providing all these crazy details, and claimed that his penis and testicle had been bitten, and his wife no longer loved him because he couldn't perform like he used to. I didn't take the call, but was sitting next to the guy that did. About 10 minutes in, I looked past the guy on the phone and saw 3 coworkers cracking up in the hall. It turned out the shark guy was actually a coworker prank calling the office from his cell phone. He kept it going about 40 minutes until he finally broke character. It was awesome. Story 29. Well, one client asked me to prove that dinosaurs didn't exist. Tried to sue a history book or something. Another customer wanted to sue Lucasfilms for killing his favorite character in the movies, Han Solo. Story 30. Ianal, but a neighbor was. She was once asked to defend a bloke who'd been doing something rather odd. It all started when the bloke's neighbors complained to the local council about the stench coming from his bins. The council came to have a butcher's at it and found it to be stuffed with a shed-load of dead chickens. Not restaurant waste chickens or out-of-date ones, fully feathered ones. A quick poke at the chickens revealed that it wasn't the first time they'd been poked, and that these unfortunate birds had in fact been fucked to death by the wrong kind of. A speedy search warrant was executed, and a 5 mm thick rubber apron was found, complete with hole with scratches all around it. It was caked in feathers and, according to the lab reports. After a bit of investigation, it turned out that his wife held the chickens and effectively jerked him off with them, with his through the hole in the apron and their feet scrabbling away at the rubber until they died. And then she'd grab another and go at it again until he coughed his filthy yogurt into them. His defense was that he wasn't actually screwing them. His wife was doing the screwing by moving the feathery pillows. She said that the case rested on the fact that there was no way the chickens could have been shown as consensual in the whole thing. He and his missus did similar amounts of time for it. Story 31. Standard preface of, not a lawyer, but I know someone. I met somebody who went to law school and was still friends with a lawyer for a group that wanted to hunt endangered animals. They paid the lawyer to look for ways to legally do it and to protect them if anybody brought a lawsuit to them. Edit. Okay, I am going to reformat the anti-PETA statement because, as most people have pointed out, the well-known irony of PETA's mission. Edit 2. I am going to delete the PETA statement because it is seeming to detract from my initial comment. Story 32. Am late to the game lawyer. Once had a gentleman come to my office with an interest in suing his former employer. My office is general civil litigation, and I handle our employment matters. As an aside to that, he also specifically asked for a female attorney for reasons not related to this story. I met with him for about half an hour. He explained that he had been terminated from his employment and believed it to be gender biased. In my jurisdiction, an employer needs to show a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for discharge, and while this hurdle can be overcome, it's a high one. I asked him if he had ever been disciplined, cited, or written up in the past, to establish if the employer would be able to say he was an unfit worker. If he had an unblemished record, our job is easier. He said yes, 12 times, in 2 years. I finished the interview, thanked him for his interest in our business, but told him we would not be able to take the case. I sent him off with a few referral numbers, but I don't know if he ever found someone to take his case. Story 33. Story time. I had a bar referral call my office one day, and it was a nice woman who was almost in tears. Once I calmed her down and was able to ask her how I could help, she explained to me that someone had emptied her bank account and forced her to sign a contract saying that she would marry a stranger. I was beyond confused, but being a young attorney and wanting to help, I decided to get more detail from her. I asked for more information, and what followed was one of the most bizarre things I've ever heard. So this woman claimed to be Nicholas Sparks' girlfriend. You know, the guy that wrote the Notebook and Dear John? Well, she is going on and on about how they're in love and how she was going to go to a convention being held in his honor with him. Supposedly, she wasn't able to be his date, however, because he had to be single and appear desirable to other women. In order to preserve the illusion that he was single, she reached out to a matchmaking company to get a date for the convention. She signed some paperwork with them and said she gave them her credit card. When she got home, she read the paperwork and realized that she had signed up to marry a stranger for $10,000, 00, and that Nicholas was going to be so mad at her. I began to realize during the course of the conversation that something was likely wrong with this woman's mental health, and I mean that in the most respectful way I can say it. She couldn't stay on a single train of thought. She kept making numerous outrageous claims about herself and her life, and the thoughts she did complete were riddled with inconsistencies. Here are a few choice selections. 1. Nicholas Sparks wrote Dear John about her and her husband, and that was how they met. She claimed he died in the war, which isn't how the story even goes. Later, she said she wasn't and never had been married. 2. She claimed that her father had programmed the first computer in Ohio in the 60 ES, and that she had written the language for him. He took all the credit because he was an adult, and nobody would take her seriously at her age. 3. That the internet used to be able to teach you anything back in the day, including martial arts, psychology, and the future. It didn't work anymore due to 9/11s because the terrorists sabotaged all the programs. After about 10 minutes of trying to figure out if this poor woman had been defrauded by a company, a man takes the phone from her, puts it on speakerphone, and introduces himself as her best friend and caretaker. She says that he is who he says he is, and tells me that he's an FBI agent. He asks if we can speak alone. I say yes, and he takes the phone from her. He explains to me that the woman I have been speaking to is a diagnosed schizophrenic, that he actually is her caretaker, and that he isn't an FBI agent. He tells me he's so sorry she's been wasting my time and explains what's going on. Apparently, this poor woman has been suffering from the delusion that she is Nicholas Sparks' fiancé after seeing the movie Dear John. She'd apparently believed that delusion for a number of years. Recently, she decided that she needed to go to the Nicholas Sparks convention and had to have a date, so she contacted a matchmaking company. The company hadn't signed her off to marry anyone, which is impossible, and had instead set her up with 10 different men that could take her on dates. She did spend $2,000, 00, not $10,000, 00 like she claimed to me on the phone, which was a waste of her savings, but there wasn't any fraud. It's just a poor, mentally incapacitated woman who was hopelessly confused and upset. I can honestly say that it was the weirdest call I've ever gotten. It was a mix of confusing, hilarious, and sad. Story 34, not a lawyer, but my good friend's boyfriend is a big-shot lawyer downtown and works on high-profile cases, i.e. the Target breach, and he had told us about a case involving a nurse. This nurse was contracted out by a hospital downtown and hired to give flu vaccines to patients, residents at a local string of assisted living homes. According to the background information I was given, hepatitis C was very common back in the baby boomer days, from lack of knowledge of STDs and lack of effective protection. Apparently, this nurse decided it would be a good idea to reuse the needle they had on every single patient. From looking back on the records, one of the first few people she immunized had Hep C, and she ended up giving it a bunch of seniors. Wasn't given the exact number. But it was so bad that they had to contact the CDC and consider it an outbreak. The best part was that the family of the elderly were suing the nurse and the nursing homes. The nursing homes were suing the nurse and the hospital that contracted her out. The nurse tried suing the hospital for lack of training. Also, the nurse had been given warnings before and was previously let go from another job because she was reusing needles. Teal doctor nurse reuses vaccine needle and gives a bunch of old people Hep C ***. Story 35. Many years ago, when I was still a trainee solicitor, my then mentor wanted me to see a client on his behalf. He didn't give me any details other than he was a new client, and I was to take initial instructions. Criminal law BTW. So there I am, keen but wet behind the ears, when this very large man comes into my small office and starts to inquire about the legal age of consent, 16 in my country. He then tells me the reason is he wants to start producing and wants to be sure about the law. Well, then that changes the answer, as it is a different question, 18 in my country. He gets upset and animated, saying how he wanted to produce that had much younger girls in it, 14-ish. I explain the legal implications of this and how he would find himself in jail in very little time. He then goes on to his next idea, which is he wants to produce for animals, not or anything like that, videos of two animals making love, and he wants to retail it to domestic pets. At this point, my mentor had overheard some, if not all, of the consultation. Without saying a word, he walks into my office, up to my desk. I kept a picture of my family dog on my desk. He takes the picture of my dog off my desk and leaves the room. It was the strangest consultation I have ever had to this day. Story 36. A fellow came to me in 1996 and said he was able to stop his grand mal seizures by smoking pot. He was a very difficult, sometimes abusive hothead with a long history of criminal cases. He had no money. He wanted to make pot legal in Canada. Many lawyers had already turned him away. I took it on, very reluctantly. It was obviously a complete long shot, but I was young and ambitious. George Soros's foundation learned about the challenge, funded the case, and provided some experts. A few years later, and too many hours, arguments, tears, and sleepless nights to count, damned if he didn't win. His case became the national template for medical marijuana in Canada. The client wanted full legalization, so he was disappointed with the result. Oh well, I tried. Story 37. Well, not me, but my father is a lawyer. And a man wanted to hire him so he could defend his son on the trial after the mentioned son killed his mother. My father couldn't take it. I mean, he had worked some pretty fucked up cases with gang members and drug dealers, but I guess this one was too low even for him. Story 38. Had a case where a man refused to pay rent because his apartment smelled terrible and was making him sick. His landlord tried to evict him. A few days after taking the case and before his first hearing, the ceiling in his bathroom collapsed. Turns out some plumbing wasn't connected and his ceiling walls had been filling with for weeks/months. The landlord settled pretty quickly after that. Story 39. I've had several, but the best was a custody divorce about 5 years ago. This guy was a super smart engineer, but he fell for a woman who was just white trash. He married her, and at the time of the divorce, they had 2 kids aged 6 and 4. One day she told him she wanted a divorce and wanted him to move out. It was a huge house in a gated community, so I advised him to move to another part of the house so he could be near his kids. I also told him that the reason she wanted him out of the house was so that she could have the man she was cheating on him with move in. He did not believe she was cheating, so I told him to go to the gate and check the logs. Sure enough, my client left every morning at 6:30 a.m. for work, and around 7:30 a.m. 3 to 5 times a week, another man would check in at the gate and say he was headed to my client's house. I dug into the name, and it was my client's wife's ex-boyfriend, who was fresh off an 8-year stint in prison for sexual assault and attempted murder. Part of his parole was having to register as an offender. My client confronted his wife and recorded her response, one-party consent state. She basically admitted to cheating, admitted to her lover being an offender, then told my client she wanted to move her lover in, and if my client did not move out, she would make their children's lives miserable and make sure they know it is because daddy is being selfish. She lawyered up after that, and we played the tape for her attorney in the first conference. He made some noise about consent and it not sounding like her, but he knew her allowing a registered offender around her kids was damning. In the end, he got the house, full custody, and the bank accounts. She got 1 car, her clothes and jewelry, which were very valuable, some of the household items, and $25,000 cash. She literally moved from a palatial home in a gated neighborhood in the nicest part of town into a trailer in an unincorporated part of the county. Don't marry trash.